Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching from and what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoy hearing this story. Now, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's drift into a peaceful slumber together. This time I will tell you about the Little Mermaid. Let's get started. In the vast, uncharted depths of the sea, far beyond the reach of the human world, a kingdom flourished, vibrant with the mysteries of the ocean. This kingdom, under the rule of King Triton, was a magical place where coral castles shimmered like jewels in the sunlight that trickled down from above, and the waters danced in a symphony of color and life. Fish of every shape and size swam freely among the seaweed, while the currents carried with them the whispers of distant lands. The king's palace was magnificent, built into a sprawling coral reef, surrounded by gardens of the most vibrant sea anemones and vast fields of kelp. This was the world Ariel, the youngest of King Triton's daughters, called home. Ariel's world was one of serenity and beauty, but it was also a world of limitations. Despite the grandeur of her underwater kingdom, Ariel had always been deeply curious about the surface world. To her, the world above the water's surface was a place filled with wonder and possibility, something foreign, wild, and untamed. She often gazed up at the surface of the ocean, her heart longing to explore the unknown. Ariel was not like her sisters, who were content with the underwater world they knew so well. She felt a deep pull, a yearning, to venture beyond the boundaries of her home. Her curiosity was her guiding light, leading her to the most curious and fascinating of discoveries. King Triton, a powerful and wise ruler, was deeply protective of his daughters. He had seen the dangers that existed above the water's surface, and he had always warned his daughters to stay away from humans. For him, the world of humans was a place of destruction and peril, full of creatures who could not be trusted. As a result, King Triton had always kept a close watch on his daughters, especially Ariel, who was the youngest and most adventurous. While his daughters were content with the luxury of the underwater kingdom, Ariel could not ignore the allure of the world above. Ariel's fascination with the human world began when she was just a little mermaid. Every day, she would swim farther from the palace, exploring the deep trenches and hidden caves that lay beyond the realm of her family's protection. It was on one such journey that Ariel discovered a shipwreck, the remnants of a once grand vessel that had sunk into the sea long ago. She swam closer to the wreckage, her heart pounding with excitement. The wreck was overgrown with barnacles, coral, and seaweed, but there was something mesmerizing about it, something that stirred her imagination. Ariel spent hours searching the wreckage, examining the human artifacts that lay scattered throughout the ship. There were broken compasses, rusted swords, and ancient treasure chests filled with coins. Every item she found spoke to her of a world she could not yet understand. As Ariel explored the shipwreck, she began to find objects that were foreign to her, things that made her wonder about the lives of humans. She came across a small music box, its delicate melody still playing despite the years it had spent submerged in the ocean. She held it close to her heart, captivated by the music it played, which seemed to echo through the water like a song from a distant land. Each new discovery deepened her fascination with humans and their way of life. There was a sense of magic and mystery in the objects she found, a sense of life beyond the ocean that filled her with wonder. Her adventures did not go unnoticed. Ariel's constant exploration of the surface world soon became a topic of conversation among her sisters. They often teased her for her obsession with humans and their strange artifacts, but Ariel couldn't help herself. The world above the ocean was a world of endless possibilities, and she wanted to know more. She longed to understand the music that humans made, the stories they told, the lives they led. More than anything, she dreamed of being able to walk among them, to feel the warmth of the sun on her face and the earth beneath her feet. Despite her growing obsession with the human world, Ariel never spoke to her father about her desires. She knew that King Triton would never approve of her interest in humans, and she feared his anger. He had made it clear that humans were dangerous, and his word was law in the underwater kingdom. But Ariel's yearning only grew stronger with each passing day, and she found herself more and more drawn to the world above the surface. One day, while swimming near the surface, Ariel saw something that would change her life forever. She had been gliding through the water, her mind wandering, when she saw something gleaming in the distance. She swam closer, her heart racing with excitement. It was a ship, a large one, much grander than the wrecks she had explored before. The ship was sailing across the sea, its sails billowing in the wind, and the sun reflecting off its polished wood and brass. Ariel's eyes widened in awe as she watched the ship move gracefully over the waves. For a moment, she simply floated there, mesmerized by the sight. It was on this ship that she first saw him, the human who would become the object of her affection and the catalyst for the choices she would soon make. Ariel's eyes locked onto the figure of a young man standing at the bow of the ship. He was tall, handsome, and radiated a sense of strength and authority. His dark hair flew in the wind, and his eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement Ariel had only ever seen in the sea creatures she loved so much. He was unlike any human she had seen before, and for the first time, Ariel felt a deep sense of longing, not only for the world of humans, but for the young man who seemed to embody all the things she had always dreamed of. As the ship sailed farther away, Ariel felt a sense of loss. She had barely caught a glimpse of this fascinating human, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was the key to the world she so desperately wanted to explore. Ariel knew that this moment would stay with her forever, and she couldn't help but wonder, who was this man? What was his life like? Would she ever be able to meet him? With a heavy heart, Ariel swam back to her kingdom, her mind consumed with thoughts of the mysterious human. But deep within her, she knew that her life would never be the same. This brief encounter with the ship, and with the human on board, had awakened something inside her, a longing for a world she could not yet understand but knew she had to be a part of. The more Ariel thought about the human world, the more she realized how much she craved something more, something beyond the safety of her kingdom and the love of her family. She wanted to live, to explore, and to experience life in a way that was not confined by the ocean's walls. It was then that Ariel made a decision, one that would lead her down a path full of uncertainty and danger. She would find a way to visit the human world. And so, Ariel's journey began. Little did she know, the choices she would make in the coming days would change not only her life, but the lives of those she loved forever. The sea, which had once been her safe haven, would soon become the stage for a story that would transcend the boundaries of land and water, love and sacrifice. Ariel had embarked on a journey of self-discovery, one that would lead her to confront the challenges of growing up, finding love, and ultimately, discovering what it means to truly be free. The ocean, though vast and mysterious, was no longer large enough to contain the curiosity that churned within Ariel. The surface world, once a mere idea in her dreams, had become an obsession. Ariel's heart pulsed with excitement each time she swam near the surface, yearning for a glimpse of the humans who lived above the waves. she could not shake the image of the ship she had seen or the captivating human who had caught her eye. Every day, she wondered about him, about the life he led, about what it would be like to stand beside him and share in the adventures of the world she had only imagined. It wasn't long before her chance arrived. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast a golden glow upon the ocean, Ariel swam to the surface yet again. This time, she was determined to stay close enough to observe the human world for longer than before. She had spent so much of her time imagining what it might be like, but now she was ready to see it for herself, to witness the world from the other side of the water. As she broke through the surface, her eyes widened with awe. The scene before her was like something from a dream. A large, majestic ship sailed gracefully across the water, its tall sails billowing in the wind and its flag fluttering proudly. It was unlike any ship she had ever seen before. The ship seemed almost alive, moving with the rhythm of the waves, as if it were in perfect harmony with the ocean. Ariel's heart raced as she swam closer, unable to take her eyes off of it. For a moment, Ariel hesitated. She had heard the warnings from her father, King Triton, countless times. He had always told her that humans were dangerous, that they were not to be trusted. And yet, here she was, drawn to the very creatures he had warned her about. But her curiosity outweighed her fears, and so, without a second thought, she swam closer to the ship, silently gliding through the water, eager to see more. As she neared the ship, she saw that it was not just a vessel, it was a world unto itself. There were people aboard, dressed in colorful clothes, laughing and talking as they moved about the deck. Some of them appeared to be busy with work, adjusting the sails or steering the ship, while others seemed to be enjoying the journey, gazing out at the horizon or chatting with one another. Ariel marveled at the variety of life that filled the ship. There was a sense of freedom and excitement in the air, something that Ariel had never experienced in her own underwater world. The ship was alive with the energy of those who sailed it, and Ariel could not help but be fascinated. But then, her eyes were drawn to him. At the very bow of the ship, standing tall and confident, was the young man she had seen before. His dark hair flew in the wind, and his clothes fluttered around him, though there was a certain elegance to the way he carried himself. Ariel felt an overwhelming sense of wonder and awe as she watched him. He was everything she had imagined and more, a man whose presence seemed to command the attention of everyone around him. He stood with such grace, such authority, and yet there was a gentleness in his expression that Ariel could not ignore. His eyes were bright and full of life, and when he smiled, it was as though the entire world lit up. Ariel's heart fluttered in her chest, and she found herself unable to look away. In that moment, she knew she had to know him. She had to learn more about the man who had captured her attention so completely. The more she watched him, the more she felt drawn to him. There was something about him that made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. He was not like anyone she had met in her underwater world, and she could not help but wonder what it would be like to be part of his world. Suddenly, as if by fate, the ship rocked slightly, and a loud noise erupted from the deck. Ariel snapped out of her trance, her heart pounding. The young man had lost his balance, teetering at the edge of the ship. Without thinking, Ariel acted on instinct. She rushed toward the ship, her powerful tail propelling her through the water faster than ever before. She could see the man's face, his expression one of shock and fear as he struggled to regain his footing. In that instant, Ariel knew what she had to do. With a final burst of speed, she leapt from the water, her body arcing gracefully through the air, and she reached out just in time to catch the man as he fell. Her hands gripped his arm, pulling him back to safety, just as the ship rocked again. Ariel, still holding him tightly, guided him away from the edge of the deck into a safer spot. The man, now stunned but alive, looked around in confusion. He hadn't seen what had happened. He hadn't seen Ariel, the one who had saved him. He only felt the sensation of being pulled away from danger, the feeling of someone or something helping him. His eyes scanned the water, but he saw no one. Ariel, now submerged in the water, watched him from below, her heart racing. She had saved him, but in doing so, she had remained a mystery. For a long moment, the man stood at the edge of the ship, looking out at the water, trying to understand what had just happened. The crew members, who had been too far away to notice the details of the incident, gathered around him, asking if he was all right. The man nodded, his mind still racing with the strange feeling that someone, had been there to save him. But when he looked again, there was no sign of the mysterious rescuer. Ariel, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of the moment, slowly swam back into the depths of the ocean. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She had saved the man, the one who had captured her heart, but he would never know it was her. She would always remain a shadow in his memory, a fleeting figure in the water. Yet Ariel could not help but feel a sense of joy and satisfaction. She had seen him up close, she had saved him, and in doing so, had forged a connection that was deeper than words. But as she swam away, the feeling in her chest, something between longing and satisfaction, would stay with her forever. Ariel knew that her life was about to change. She had glimpsed the world of humans, and she had glimpsed him. Now, there was no turning back. The pull of the surface world was stronger than ever before, and Ariel would stop at nothing to discover more, to understand more, and perhaps to be with the one who had stolen her heart. The days that followed the encounter with the ship and the mysterious prince felt like an eternity to Ariel. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the young man who had captured her heart without even knowing it. His smile, his eyes full of life, the way he stood with such quiet confidence at the bow of the ship, Ariel couldn't shake the images from her mind. For the first time in her life, Ariel's curiosity was no longer just about the world of humans, it was about the man who had unknowingly touched her soul. She couldn't help but think about the future, about what it might be like to live in a world where she could walk among humans, to feel the earth beneath her feet and the warmth of the sun on her skin. The ocean was no longer enough to satisfy her, it was only a reminder of what she didn't have. Each day, Ariel would swim further from the palace, sometimes all the way to the surface of the ocean, to catch a glimpse of the human world. She longed to see the ship again, to be close to the prince, to speak with him, to understand his life. She imagined a life beside him, a life where she could experience all the things she had dreamed of, the music, the laughter, the joy of living freely on land. She dreamed of walking among humans, of being a part of their world, but each time she surfaced, she was reminded that she could never truly be part of that world, not as a mermaid. The more Ariel thought about it, the more she became convinced that her only hope of happiness lay in becoming human. The life she longed for, the world she yearned to be part of, was beyond her reach as long as she remained underwater. She began to question whether she could truly be happy living among the sea creatures, surrounded by the same familiar faces, the same endless blue ocean. She wanted something more. She wanted to feel the wind on her face, to walk on solid ground, to be able to speak to the prince, to laugh and dance like the humans did. In her heart, Ariel knew there was only one way for her to truly belong in their world, to become human. The thought consumed her. Ariel found herself obsessing over the idea of transformation, imagining the freedom it would bring. She could picture herself standing on land, surrounded by the beauty of the world she had always dreamed of. She could see herself walking through fields of flowers, feeling the soft grass under her feet, feeling the warmth of the sun and the coolness of the night air. She could imagine speaking to the prince, sharing stories, laughing, and experiencing the joy of human connection. But with this longing came fear. Ariel knew that her father, King Triton, would never approve of her desire to become human. He had always told her that humans were dangerous, that their world was full of destruction and sorrow. Ariel had heard the stories about how the humans had once fought the sea, causing harm to the creatures of the deep. King Triton had always made it clear that they were not to be trusted. And Ariel, being the youngest and most curious of his daughters, had always felt the weight of his protective warnings. She knew her father loved her deeply, but she also knew he would never understand her desire to leave the ocean. One evening, as Ariel swam near the surface of the sea, the longing inside her became unbearable. She could no longer ignore the pull of the human world. The water around her seemed to close in, as if the ocean itself were a prison, beautiful, yes, but limiting. Ariel needed something more, something beyond the vast expanse of blue. With a heavy heart, she made a decision. She would find a way to become human. It was then that she remembered Ursula, the sea witch. Ursula was known throughout the kingdom for her dark magic, and she was feared by all who lived in the sea. She was a mysterious figure who lived in the deepest, most dangerous part of the ocean, far from the safety of the palace. Ursula had always been a shadowy figure in Ariel's life, a name whispered in caution by the older merfolk. They spoke of her as someone who could grant wishes, but at a terrible cost. Ariel had never considered seeking her out, but now, in the midst of her desperation, Ursula seemed like the only one who might hold the key to her transformation. Ariel's mind raced. Could Ursula really help her? Could she truly make Ariel human, as she so desperately wished? The thought of making a deal with the sea witch terrified her, but the longing to be with the prince and to live on land was too great. Ariel could not bear the thought of living in the ocean forever, trapped by the boundaries of her life as a mermaid. If Ursula was the only one who could make her dream come true, Ariel knew she had to find her. That night, Ariel swam alone, far from the palace, into the dark, forbidding waters of the deep sea. The water became colder the farther she went, and the silence grew heavier as she descended deeper into the abyss. The familiar sounds of the ocean faded away, replaced by the eerie stillness of the depths. It wasn't long before Ariel reached the lair of Ursula, a place that had long been shrouded in mystery and fear. The water around her was dark and murky, filled with strange shadows that seemed to watch her every move. Ariel hesitated for a moment, fear creeping into her heart, but her resolve was unshakable. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She had made up her mind. She needed to become human, and Ursula was her only hope. At the heart of the murky waters, a large, twisted castle loomed. It was made of black coral and dark, swirling seaweed, its walls covered in a strange, glowing algae. Ariel approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what she was about to do was dangerous, but she couldn't ignore the pull of her dreams any longer. She had to face whatever awaited her in Ursula's lair. When Ariel entered the lair, she found herself standing before the sea witch, who was seated on a throne made of clamshells and sea creatures. Ursula's wide, sinister eyes glowed in the dim light, and her sharp grin revealed the power she held. The witch's long, tentacled body swayed as she observed Ariel with amusement. Well, Ursula said, her voice a low, melodious purr. What brings you to my domain, Little Mermaid? You seek something, don't you? Ariel, trembling but determined, nodded. I want to become human, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Ursula leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied Ariel. Ah, I see. You want to leave your little underwater world and walk among the humans. But tell me, what makes you think you can leave all that behind? What will you give in return? Ariel swallowed hard, knowing that the price would be high. She had heard the rumors about Ursula's bargains, but she had never imagined she would be the one seeking such a deal. The cost of her dream was still unclear, but Ariel knew she was willing to sacrifice almost anything to achieve it. I'll give anything, Ariel said, her voice full of resolve. Ursula's grin grew wider. Very well, she said, her voice dripping with delight. I will grant your wish, Little Mermaid. But there is one condition. Ariel's heart pounded with both excitement and fear as she stood before Ursula, the sea witch who had the power to grant her deepest desire. She had traveled so far, and now, standing in the lair of this mysterious and powerful creature, Ariel knew that there was no turning back. She had made her choice. She had decided to leave her life in the sea behind in the hopes of joining the world of humans, of walking on land, and of being close to the prince who had unknowingly captured her heart. But what price would she have to pay? Ursula's sinister smile widened, and her voice was soft but chilling as she spoke. Very well, Ariel, the witch purred, I shall grant your wish, but not without cost. I will make you human, just as you desire, but in return, you will give me something dear to you, your voice. The beautiful voice that you cherish so much will become mine. You will no longer be able to speak or sing, and without your voice, you will never be able to communicate in the way you did before. This is the price you must pay if you wish to walk on land among the humans. Ariel's heart sank as the reality of the deal began to settle in. Her voice was everything to her. It was her means of expressing herself, her way of singing the song she loved. To lose it felt like losing a part of herself. But the thought of living in the ocean forever, never knowing what it would be like to be with the prince, overwhelmed her. She had to make a choice. I agree, Ariel said, her voice trembling but resolute. I will give you my voice if you grant me the chance to be human. Ursula's eyes gleamed with malicious delight as she raised one of her tentacles high into the air. The waters around them began to swirl violently, and the sea witch began to chant an incantation in a language Ariel didn't understand. The air was thick with magic, and the water around Ariel seemed to hum with energy. Ariel closed her eyes, her heart racing, as she felt the changes begin to take place. A strange warmth spread through her body, and her tail, her beautiful, powerful tail, began to transform. The scales that had once shimmered like jewels dissolved into nothingness, and in their place, her lower body slowly morphed into 2 human legs. Ariel gasped as the transformation took hold. The sensation was unlike anything she had ever experienced, painful, yet exhilarating. Her tail, which had been her life and her identity for so long, was now gone, replaced by legs that felt foreign to her. When the transformation was complete, Ariel looked down at her new form. She could feel the weight of the legs beneath her, the unfamiliar sensation of standing upright on solid ground. Her long, flowing hair, still a brilliant red, cascaded down her back, and her clothes, if they could be called clothes, remained damp but barely recognizable. The world around her seemed to have shifted as well. The once familiar underwater surroundings now seemed distant and unreal, as if they were no longer her world. Her excitement bubbled up again, but that excitement was quickly tempered by a feeling of loss. She opened her mouth to speak, to sing, to call out in joy, but the sound that escaped her lips was nothing but silence. The absence of her voice was immediate and profound. She could no longer hear her own voice, the thing that had always defined her. It was as if a part of her soul had been stripped away. Ursula's laughter echoed in the dark water, and Ariel turned to face her. "Now, Little Mermaid," Ursula said with a cruel grin, "you are human. You may walk among the humans and live the life you desire. But remember, if you do not make the prince fall in love with you and marry you before the sun sets on the third day of your transformation, you will lose your soul and be mine forever. If he does not kiss you with true love, you will return to the sea, but not as you were. You will be turned to foam upon the waves. Do not forget, my dear, this is your only chance." Ariel nodded, the weight of Ursula's warning pressing down on her chest. She had come this far, and now there was no turning back. She had made the ultimate sacrifice, giving up her voice in exchange for a chance at love. She had 3 days to make the prince fall in love with her, or everything would be lost. With one final glance at the dark, murky lair of Ursula, Ariel turned and swam to the surface of the water. As she rose, the sea around her seemed to part, and she broke through the surface, gasping for air. The world above was vast and bright, full of life and possibility. She was free to walk among the humans, to be part of their world. She could see the shoreline in the distance, the land where she had longed to be for so long. Her heart raced as she swam closer to the shore. The land seemed so close now, and yet so distant. She was no longer a part of the ocean, no longer a mermaid. She was a human, and she was about to step into a world that she had only dreamed of. When Ariel reached the shore, she pulled herself out of the water, her legs trembling beneath her. She had to find her way. She had to find the prince. She didn't know where he was or how she would find him, but she knew that she had to make him fall in love with her. She had to make him see her for who she truly was. As Ariel looked out at the land before her, her heart swelled with hope and uncertainty. She had been given the chance she had always dreamed of, but the path ahead was full of challenges. She could not speak to the prince, and she could not sing to him. All she had was her heart, her courage, and the hope that love could find its way without words. But as she stood on the shore, her heart pounding in her chest, Ariel knew that she had made the right choice. She had given up everything for a chance at something more, something beyond the confines of the ocean. She had become human, and now she would fight for her chance at love. Ariel stood on the shore, her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She had made the ultimate sacrifice to become human, to walk among the world she had only dreamed of, but now the reality of her transformation had set in. She felt strange on her new legs, awkward and unsteady, as if the very ground beneath her was foreign. The sea that had been her home, the water that had embraced her for so long, seemed like a distant memory. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone on land, with only her dreams and the price she had paid for them to guide her. The sunlight bathed her in its warmth, and she squinted as her eyes adjusted to the brightness. The land stretched out before her, vast and beautiful, but it was also intimidating. She had never ventured far beyond the ocean, and now that she was on land, everything felt strange, as if she were a stranger in a world that should have been familiar. The air was different, dry and thick, and the wind blew through her hair in a way she had never felt before. It was exhilarating and terrifying at once. Ariel took a tentative step forward, feeling the earth beneath her feet. Her legs were strong but unpracticed, and she stumbled slightly before catching her balance. She took another step, then another, testing her newfound abilities. She was no longer a mermaid, no longer a creature of the sea, but a human. The world around her seemed vast, and with every step, she felt a sense of awe and wonder. She could smell the earth, the grass, the trees, everything felt so alive and vibrant. The world of humans was indeed magnificent, far beyond what she had ever imagined. But her excitement was tempered by a heavy sense of loss. She could no longer speak or sing. The voice that had been such an essential part of her identity was gone. She could no longer communicate in the way she was used to, and she was left feeling powerless, as though she had lost her true self. She could hear the wind, the rustling of leaves, and the distant sounds of the land, but there was nothing she could do to add her voice to the chorus of life around her. Her inability to speak felt like an invisible weight, heavy and suffocating. Despite this, Ariel pushed forward. She had made a decision to be here, to be part of this world, and she wasn't going to let her silence stop her. She was determined to find the prince, to make him fall in love with her. She couldn't communicate with him through words, but perhaps she could speak through her actions, through the way she carried herself, through her heart. She had to believe that love would find its way, even without her voice. Ariel walked along the shore, her feet sinking slightly into the soft sand, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She knew little about the human world. She had spent so much of her life under the sea, swimming freely among the creatures of the ocean, that she had no real knowledge of how humans lived. But she knew that she had to find the prince. Her heart told her that this was the path she had to take, no matter how uncertain or difficult it might be. As Ariel walked along the beach, she noticed the distant outline of a grand castle perched on a hill in the distance. It was beautiful, majestic even, and it filled her with hope. It was the kind of place she had imagined in her dreams, tall towers, elegant walls, and windows that looked out over the sea. Could this be where the prince lived? Could this be where she would find him? Ariel's heart swelled with the possibility. With newfound determination, she began to walk towards the castle, feeling the weight of her new legs with every step. The journey was long, and she grew tired as the sun began to set, casting a soft golden glow over the landscape. Ariel was not used to walking on land for such long distances, and her legs ached with the unfamiliar strain. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had come so far, and there was no turning back now. She was going to find him. As she made her way through the village near the castle, Ariel's eyes widened at the sights and sounds around her. The people, so unlike the creatures of the sea, bustled about with purpose. There were women selling fruit, children playing in the streets, and merchants calling out their wares. The hustle and bustle of life on land was overwhelming, but Ariel could not help but feel a sense of wonder. Every corner of the village was filled with new experiences, people laughing, talking, living in a way that was foreign to her. She was seeing the world from a completely different perspective, and it was both thrilling and daunting. Ariel walked slowly through the village, watching everything with wide eyes. The faces she passed were kind, but no one paid much attention to her. She was a stranger here, an outsider. She didn't know how to navigate this world, and without her voice, she couldn't even ask for directions. She felt a pang of isolation deep in her chest. The land was full of people, yet she felt more alone than ever. She missed her family, the sea creatures who had once been her companions, the music of the ocean that had always comforted her. But she was no longer a part of that world. She had chosen this path, and now she had to forge ahead on her own. Eventually, Ariel reached the castle gates, and her heart skipped a beat as she looked up at the towering structure before her. The castle seemed to glow in the fading light of day, its walls strong and proud, its windows reflecting the colors of the sunset. Ariel had never seen anything so grand. She could feel her heart racing as she wondered if this was the place where the prince lived. Could he be inside? Was he waiting for her? Ariel's mind raced with questions, and she felt a sense of hope surge within her. As she approached the castle doors, a guard stepped forward, his expression stern. Ariel could see the disbelief in his eyes as he looked her over. She was drenched from the sea, her clothes ragged and wet, and she stood before him, a stranger in a strange land. Without the ability to speak, she couldn't explain who she was or what she sought. The guard looked at her skeptically, but said nothing. Ariel stood there for a long moment, her heart sinking. How could she make him understand that she was here to find the prince, the man she had saved, the one who had captured her heart? How could she make her presence known in a world where she had no voice? Ariel took a deep breath and, despite the overwhelming odds, she smiled. She knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. She might not be able to speak, but she had her heart, her spirit, and the hope that the prince would recognize her. She had sacrificed so much for this chance, and she was determined to make it count. The guard, still wary, stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Ariel's heart swelled as she entered the castle grounds. She had taken the first step, and now all she could do was wait, hope, and pray that her love for the prince would be enough to guide her through the challenges ahead. The air in the castle was heavy with anticipation as Ariel walked through the grand halls, her heart racing with each step. She had made it. She had found the prince's home, the towering castle that seemed so far away when she had first seen it from the shore. But now, standing at its gates, she had crossed the threshold into the world she had longed for. However, despite the beauty of the castle and the grandeur of her new life, Ariel felt a gnawing sense of uncertainty deep within her. Without her voice, she was unable to communicate in the way she had always known. How could she express herself to the prince? How could she make him understand the feelings she had for him, the way he had captured her heart, the way she had saved his life? All these thoughts swirled in her mind as she walked deeper into the castle, her feet brushing against the cold stone floor. She was determined, but fear lingered. She didn't know what to do next. Without her voice, without her ability to sing, how would she ever capture the prince's heart? She had no answers, but Ariel continued to move forward. Every step, every moment, was a chance, an opportunity to make her dreams come true. She had already sacrificed so much to be here, to be human, and now, all she could do was wait and hope. The weight of her decision hung heavy in her chest, and she knew the clock was ticking. She had 3 days to win the prince's love, or she would be lost forever, transformed into sea foam, forever swept away by the waves. Ariel's thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound from behind her. She turned around to see a figure approach, a figure she had only dreamed of seeing. It was him, the prince. Standing before her, his eyes wide with recognition, his face filled with a mixture of surprise and wonder. "You," the prince said, his voice soft, as if unsure of what to say. "You are the one who saved me. The one from the sea." Ariel's heart skipped a beat. She wanted so badly to say something, to explain, to tell him everything. She wanted to tell him about her life as a mermaid, her longing for the human world, her deep, unwavering love for him. But instead, all that came from her lips was silence. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her heart clenched as she looked into his eyes, feeling the weight of her silence. He was so close, and yet the words that could bridge the distance between them were forever out of reach. The prince seemed to sense her struggle, though. He smiled gently, as if he understood. In that moment, Ariel felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he didn't need her words to understand her. Perhaps he could see her heart without the need for speech. Perhaps love didn't need to be spoken aloud. Over the next few days, Ariel and the prince spent time together in the castle. Though they could not communicate in the traditional sense, they found ways to connect. The prince would lead her through the gardens, showing her the beauty of the world she had longed to be a part of. He would gesture toward the sky, explaining the wonders of the stars and the constellations. Ariel would smile, her eyes shining with gratitude, silently appreciating his patience and kindness. There was a bond between them, though it was unspoken. Ariel learned about the prince's life, the struggles he had faced, the world he had lived in, and the loneliness that sometimes lingered in his heart. He, too, had longed for something more. He had felt a deep yearning, a desire for something he could not name. When he spoke of his past, his voice was soft, filled with a gentle sorrow that Ariel could understand. She, too, had known loneliness, her longing for the human world, her desire for a connection that seemed out of reach and made her feel like an outsider in her own home. Despite the obstacles of communication, Ariel felt closer to the prince than ever before. There were moments of silence between them, but those moments were filled with understanding. His presence was a comfort to her, and she could sense that, in some way, he felt the same. She could see it in the way he looked at her. His eyes were kind, and there was something in the way he held her gaze that made Ariel believe that he was beginning to understand her, too. But all the while, Ariel knew that time was running out. The 3rd day was quickly approaching, and if the prince did not fall in love with her by sunset, she would lose everything. The thought of returning to the sea, of never being able to walk on land again, filled her with dread. She could not imagine a life without the prince, without the world she had so longed to be a part of. Yet, as the final hours of the 3rd day began to approach, Ariel found herself struggling with the weight of the situation. The prince had been kind to her, but there had been no sign of the love she so desperately needed. In the final hours of the day, just as Ariel's heart sank with the realization that she might lose everything, something unexpected happened. The air around the castle seemed to shift, as though the very world itself was holding its breath. Ariel stood at the edge of the garden, looking out at the horizon, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She could feel the sun setting behind her, casting long shadows across the land. It was almost time. Her hope was fading, and the darkness of defeat was settling in. But then, she heard it. A familiar voice calling her name. She turned around quickly, her heart leaping in her chest. The prince stood before her, his face filled with emotion. He was smiling at her, and there was something in his eyes, something deeper than mere kindness, something more than friendship. Ariel's heart fluttered as he reached out to her. "I don't know how to explain it," the prince said, his voice full of emotion, "but there's something about you. Something that calls to me. I've been searching for you my entire life." Ariel's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since her transformation, she felt the warmth of hope fill her chest. The prince had come to understand her, not through words, but through something far more powerful, the connection they had forged, the bond that transcended speech, the love that had grown between them. "I love you," the prince continued, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I don't know how, but I know that I do." Ariel's heart soared. She had done it. She had made him fall in love with her. She had no words to express her joy, but her eyes shone with everything she felt. In that moment, she knew that the love she had sought, the dream she had given everything for, was within her reach. But just as Ariel's joy reached its peak, there was a sudden shift in the air, a chill that ran through the garden. A dark shadow loomed over them, and Ariel turned, knowing all too well what it meant. Ursula had returned. The serene atmosphere that had enveloped the garden was suddenly shattered. The air turned cold, and a sense of dread filled the space around Ariel and the prince. For a brief moment, Ariel's heart soared with the overwhelming joy of the prince's confession, but that moment was quickly interrupted by the chilling presence of Ursula, the sea witch, whose shadow had crept over them. Ariel's instincts immediately kicked in. She knew what this meant. Ursula had returned to claim what was hers. The sea witch had been lurking in the background, waiting for the moment when Ariel's dream would be fulfilled, and now that the prince had fallen in love with her, Ursula would stop at nothing to seize her victory. From the edge of the garden, the wicked figure of Ursula emerged, her monstrous, tentacled form towering over them. Her wide grin spread across her face, and her sharp eyes gleamed with malice as she approached. The prince stood frozen for a moment, confused, trying to comprehend the situation. He had no idea who this dark creature was or what she wanted, but Ariel felt an icy terror in her heart as she saw Ursula's knowing gaze settle upon her. The sea witch's voice rang out, low and commanding, as she spoke. "So, you think you've won, Little Mermaid?" Ursula's voice was dripping with venom, each word punctuated by a malicious laugh. "You've given up everything for a chance at love, but now it's time for me to collect what is mine. You may have the prince's heart for now, but you've forgotten the price you paid for your transformation. You belong to me, Ariel, and I intend to claim what's mine." Ariel's blood ran cold as the full weight of Ursula's words sank in. She had promised her voice in exchange for becoming human, and now the time had come to pay the price. Ariel tried to speak, to plead with the prince, but all that came from her was a hopeless silence. The words she so desperately wanted to say could not leave her lips. She felt helpless, her dream teetering on the brink of disaster. Ursula, sensing Ariel's panic, took full advantage of the situation. She raised her arms, and with a sweeping motion, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The prince, still bewildered, looked back and forth between Ariel and Ursula, unsure of what to believe. Ursula's form twisted, growing larger and more menacing as she loomed over them, her power radiating through the air like an electric storm. "You are nothing without your voice, Ariel," Ursula sneered. "You will never speak to the prince, never sing to him, never express your love. You've given up your one true gift. And now, I will take what's mine, and you will return to the sea, just like you were meant to. All that you've worked for, all that you've dreamed of, will be nothing more than a fleeting fantasy." Ariel's heart clenched with despair. She had worked so hard, fought so fiercely for this chance. The love she felt for the prince, the bond they had built, all seemed to hang in the balance. She couldn't bear the thought of losing it all, of returning to the ocean as nothing more than foam on the waves. But in that moment of despair, Ariel felt something stir deep within her. It wasn't her voice that mattered, she realized, it was her heart. She had given up so much to be here, to be human, but her feelings for the prince transcended the limitations Ursula had imposed upon her. She had made a choice, a sacrifice, and no matter what Ursula did, no one could take away her love. Not even the sea witch. The prince, still confused but now seeing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward, his gaze locking with Ariel's. For a moment, the two shared a silent understanding, a deep connection. The prince had been uncertain, unsure of what was happening, but now, looking at Ariel, his heart swelling with love, he understood. He could feel the depth of her sacrifice, the strength of her heart, even without words. He turned to face Ursula, his face set with determination. "Leave her alone," he cried, his voice full of authority. "She is not yours to take. I love her, and I will not let you destroy her happiness." Ursula's eyes narrowed, her expression one of contempt as she watched the prince stand up to her. "Foolish human," she spat. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing compared to the power I wield. I will make sure Ariel pays the price for her defiance." With a sudden, terrifying movement, Ursula lifted her arms again, and the sea surged violently. The waters around them began to churn, rising up like a storm. Ariel's heart raced as the power of the sea which threatened to overwhelm them both. The ground beneath them seemed to quake with Ursula's fury, and the skies darkened above. But Ariel, with a sudden surge of courage, realized something. This wasn't just her fight. It was the prince's fight too. And together, they could overcome this darkness. She may not have her voice, but she had her heart, and she had the love of the prince to guide her. There was a way to defeat Ursula, a way to end her reign of terror. Ariel stepped forward, her body tense with determination. The prince, sensing her strength, stood by her side. Together, they confronted Ursula, their eyes locked in a shared resolve. In that moment, Ariel knew that their love was more powerful than Ursula's darkness. She had already given up her voice, but now she was ready to fight for everything she had left, the love she had found, the life she had chosen, and the freedom to live it. Ursula's laughter filled the air, but it no longer held the same power. It was as if the very world was pushing back against her, the light of love and hope shining through. Ariel reached out her hand to the prince, and as their hands met, a surge of energy pulsed between them, a force greater than anything Ursula had ever known. The sea witch shrieked in frustration, her power faltering as the combined strength of Ariel and the prince shattered her hold on them. The darkness began to recede, and the storm of chaos Ursula had conjured began to subside. Ariel and the prince stood tall, united, their love a force that no evil could extinguish. Ursula, defeated for the moment, recoiled, her figure shrinking as her grip on the world around them loosened. Ariel and the prince had won. Together, they had triumphed over the darkness that had threatened to tear them apart. The sea, once a place of limitless beauty and mystery, now seemed distant to Ariel as she stood beside the prince in the fading light of the garden. The storm that had threatened to tear them apart was gone, and the once chilling presence of Ursula had vanished. In its place, a sense of calm and peace filled the air, the sunlight now streaming gently through the trees. For the first time since her transformation, Ariel could breathe easily, her heart filled with a joy she thought she might never experience again. The prince stood by her side, his hand still holding hers, his love shining through his every glance. Ariel's journey had been long, filled with unimaginable challenges and sacrifices, but it had led her to this moment, the moment when love triumphed over darkness and the future became bright with possibility. With the defeat of Ursula, Ariel knew that she had earned her place in the human world, not by magic or manipulation, but by the power of her heart and the strength of the love she shared with the prince. She had given up so much, but what she had gained in return was far greater than she could have ever imagined. The prince looked at Ariel, his eyes filled with admiration and affection. "I don't know how it's possible," he said softly, his voice full of emotion, "but I've always felt like I've known you. You're unlike anyone I've ever met. I've searched for you, dreamed of you, and now I know this is where I belong, with you." Ariel smiled, her heart soaring. She could not speak to him, but the emotions she felt in that moment were clearer than any words could ever convey. The bond between them was unbreakable, forged through sacrifices, challenges, and a deep, unwavering love that had transcended both land and sea. She had found her place, and it was with him, the prince who had captured her heart from the very first moment they had met. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft golden glow, Ariel and the prince walked hand in hand toward the castle. The prince had vowed to protect her, and Ariel knew that together they would face whatever came next. The castle, with its towering spires and gleaming walls, now felt like home. It was a symbol of all she had fought for, and a place where she could finally build a future with the one she loved. The people of the kingdom, who had watched from the sidelines as the events unfolded, gathered around the couple as they entered the castle. The prince's love for Ariel had become known to all, and the people, though initially skeptical of the strange woman who had appeared in their midst, now saw the bond that united them. Ariel, once a mysterious stranger from the sea, had become part of their world, an equal, a princess in her own right. Her heart, her courage, and her love for the prince had proven that she was worthy of a life by his side, and that no matter where she had come from, she had found her true home. That evening, a grand celebration was held in the castle's hall. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed through the walls. Ariel, though she could not sing, danced beside the prince, her heart full of happiness. The prince twirled her around the floor, and they moved together in perfect harmony. It was as if every step they took was a reflection of the love they shared, a love that had overcome every obstacle, every trial, and had emerged stronger than ever before. As the night went on, Ariel found herself lost in the beauty of the moment. She looked around at the people who had once been strangers, now her friends, celebrating with her. She had never imagined such a future, never dreamed that she would find a place where she truly belonged. The ocean, the world she had once known, was now a distant memory, one that she would always cherish, but one that no longer held her heart. She had found something even greater, a life with the prince, with the man she loved, in the world she had longed to be a part of. With each passing day, Ariel grew more and more at home in the human world. She learned the ways of the land, adapted to her new life, and discovered new joys and things she had never known before. She reveled in the warmth of the sun, the feel of the earth beneath her feet, and the sound of the wind in the trees. But above all, she cherished the moments spent with the prince, the moments when their hearts were united in love, when they could speak without words, when their souls connected in ways that only love could explain. The days turned to months, and the months to years. Ariel and the prince ruled the kingdom together, their love a shining example to all who knew them. They had no need for words to express their devotion, their actions, their shared glances, and the way they cared for each other spoke volumes. Ariel had found her happily ever after, not in the magical transformation she had once sought, but in the love she had discovered with the prince. And as time passed, they were blessed with a family of their own, children who would one day inherit the kingdom, the legacy of love that had begun between Ariel and the prince. Ariel, who had once longed for a world beyond the ocean, had found everything she had ever dreamed of in the land of humans. She had given up her voice, but she had gained something far more precious, love, a love that filled her heart every day and filled her life with meaning. And though she could never speak the words that had once been so important to her, she knew that her heart would always speak louder than anything her voice ever could. In the end, Ariel realized that she had not needed her voice to be heard. Love, true and pure, spoke far louder than any words could. And with that love, Ariel had found the life she had always wanted, a life with the prince, a life full of joy, laughter, and the promise of forever. The ocean, once a place of mystery and longing, now seemed a distant memory, a place that she would always carry in her heart. But it was no longer her world. Her world was here, with the prince, with the life they had built together. And she knew, in that quiet moment as the sun set over the kingdom, that this was where she belonged, forever. That's the story of the Little Mermaid. Hopefully this story can help you sleep. Good night.